Welcome. I'm Clare Anderson, and I have the great good fortune of introducing Robert Singleton on this gorgeous spring day of rebirth and renewal, and then share his artist statement with you. And then we'll spend some time in dialogue together with you all. I'd like for us to start with a question that is quite meaningful to Robert. How much can one moment hold? I invite you to ponder and pause and truly consider this question together. How much can one moment hold? There's one moment that's captured in these three canvases, a moment of profound significance that we will learn much more about and come to understand more fully together. And think of this moment here and now, us gathered together in the presence of art, bound by a shared pursuit of beauty and connection, and perhaps even transformation. Beginning in 1964 in Florida, Robert created spectacular abstractions that truly vibrate with deep and sensuous reds and colors that are evocative of intense emotion. In the mid-1970s, his home on Screamer Mountain in Clayton, Georgia, created the context for exploring the source of a mystical light. And in West Virginia, his paintings integrate all that has come before and look ahead to the beyond. Robert Singleton, though, is not just an artist, he is a true philosopher. And philosophers help us to understand the nature of ourselves and the world around us. He does this through not only his paintings, which are profoundly beautiful, each one a meditation on existence, the seen and the unseen, on the depths of human experience, but also in his writings in Core of My Joy, which is truly essential reading for life. His artistic and personal journey has included experiences of immense transformation. Most of us would be lucky to have one transformation in our lives, and somehow he has embodied many of them. He felt like he had painted himself into a corner at one point, which I'm sure that is something that we can all relate to. And at that moment, he asked that a new direction be revealed, and from the universe, one word emerged: clouds. Similarly, while traveling across the open plains of Kansas, he deeply experienced the horizon, and in one moment, like so many of him, became something greater, a lifelong exploration of the sacredness of what lies in between the visual and the emotional, the darkness and the light. And through a lifetime of dedication, Robert has created paintings that do more than capture the natural world. They invite us here today to reflect on who we are and who we could become. As he shares in his book on page 2 of Core of My Joy, the following, and I quote you. Painting is about bravery for both the artist and the viewer. Accept the unexpected and the surprise of the accidental, and choose discovery over perfection every time. Rely on your hand to know what it is doing and respect your own progression. All that matters is the truth of who we are and the capacity to love who we are along with all human beings unconditionally. The single beneficial motivation of life centers upon the compassion of the connections we share with our fellow humans. And so, I invite you in this moment to be open to revelation, to wonder, to connection, to the unexpected ways art and creativity can expand our understanding of ourselves and the world. And it is in that spirit that I welcome Robert and all of us this afternoon. And so I'm going to ask you a question, and,
Sure.
and I'm going to have you respond however you wish.
Okay.
Can you share a little bit about your artistic process? What's being translated on the canvas? How much of this is you, and how much is this perhaps a piece that passeth all understanding?
The process, none of these paintings here, well, there's a few, and there may be an exception here. There was an idea about those. We'll get in depth in a moment. But generally when I start a piece, I don't know what it's going to be. I just want to smear some paint on a canvas and then look at it and meditate on it and see what I find. A lot of times let me go back and quote Truman Capote. Years ago, I saw him being interviewed, and I don't remember, I think it was Barbara Waters was interviewing him. And she said, "Mr. Capote, are you a religious man?" "No." And he snapped right back, and then he paused, and he thought, and he said, "Yes. Because when I finish a paragraph or a chapter and I go back and read it, and I didn't do that. It came from somewhere else." And that really stuck with me. It's the same thing with most of my work. I don't really know where it comes from. I could be mystical and say that it comes from some external hand or force. We really don't understand our universe and the universe that we live in, but we move through it and take a hold of what's given us. And I've been blessed with a drive. I really think that was the first thing, a passion that I had when I was a kid about wanting to create, whether it was with music or with art, but I stayed with it. And I've been driven almost in a neurotic way at times. I need to do it. So the process is a bit mystical. I do know that early on I had to learn the techniques, the craft of painting, of what color, what paint, what brush, whatever, so that I got all that out of the way and I wasn't struggling with what brush to use. So I was freed up to use my own, to open my mind and what would come forth. Fortunately, they've all stayed in some sort of theme, so it's not just random paintings.
Well, I'm going to read your artist statement, as you've asked me to do, which I am, as you can imagine, overflowing with joy to get to do this. Right?
May I explain why? I'm in my late 80s, and I don't really count. This is so important, this body of work and the statement that goes with it, that I was afraid I would forget something. So I wrote it down with the intent of reading it. But Claire, who's such a great speaker, and I just asked her one day if she would mind reading it, and the delivery from her is far better than what I can do. So it's that's why it was written. I don't trust my memory.
But you are among the sharpest people I know. Indeed, right? And before I read it to you, I want to share that we did the same talk earlier in the year. And I truly was seized by that moment. It was if the portal to the divine, which surrounds us here, had revealed to me my own new future, something that was not anticipated. This new future, one of art, of community, of vanaprastha, which translates as retire to the forest. The outlines of that became clear. And then this week, there's a David Brooks column entitled A Surprising Route to the Best Life Possible, and explains what happened and might happen for you if we truly understand what one moment can hold. He said, and I paraphrase, "It is a great and underappreciated talent, the capacity to be seized. We too often go through life thick-skinned. School or career or life events have given us a pragmatic, instrumental, efficiency-maximizing frame of mind. We live our lives under pressure, our heads are down. But if we are open, there may be a moment of rapture that can redirect a life." And in Robert's words, this is what a moment of rapture and transformation looks like. You ready? Terrific. Years ago, I became acquainted with Carl Jung's writing. I was intrigued by the concept of the archetype. We know all human life carries genetic inheritances, 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, etc. All living organisms evolved and carried forth inherited genetic codes. Jung declared that we also inherit cumulative knowledge, the collective unconscious, and archetypes passed down from the beginning of time with us today. For instance, and applicable here, the color black has almost universally bias attached to it. It's representative of death, mystery, the unknown, and fear, to name a few influences this color delivers in many cultures. Indeed, black was the first pigment used in prehistoric art. My speculation about the color black goes back to the dawn of man. Since that point, all humankind has experienced night. Early man was most vulnerable at night. He could not see to defend himself from predatory beasts, and death came with the dark. According to Jung, these archetypes stay very close to conscious thinking across generations. However, the more educated or sophisticated a culture becomes, the more repressed this cumulative knowledge becomes. Yet it is still intact and present deep in our psyche. Oddly enough, black is not a color, but the absence of color, drawing in all light and reflecting nothing. On the other hand, white is all color reflected. And I began working on the paintings that surround us here at Gradient by creating a solid black background, actually indigo blue. The light-sensitive images, using white, were painted suspended in this dark milieu. The illusion thus created is based on the fundamental laws of the physics of color and light. However, I don't believe that you, the viewers, require a technical explanation to experience this resulting illusion. Let's first look at Memento Mori. The Latin Memento Mori means remember that you have to die. It is a common motif in art and reminds us of the inevitability of our departure from this life. The dominant feature in this painting is a cross, which is an ancient pre-Christian symbol that transcends culture and religion. A non-religious cross can symbolize hope, resilience, personal transformation, sacrifice, or a reminder of human suffering. It is often interpreted as a representation of overcoming adversity and finding strength, even in the face of pain. And individuals may adopt the cross symbol to represent their own personal journeys of growth, overcoming challenges, or finding meaning in suffering. Memento Mori, this painting, was the first in a sequence of dark paintings mystically illuminating by an unknown light origin. While staring at this work one evening, a frightening but enlightened thought came to mind. Quite naively, I had always thought that all creative expression, painting in my case, was white, that is, originating from all that is good in the human spirit. I became unnerved when it occurred to me that this painting could be for the edification of the dark side of humanity. My thinking was resolved by concluding that we carry, all of us, both lightness and darkness inside of us, and that the dark can inspire people. And this painting marked the beginning of my journey to explore the origin of this mystical light. This painting has actually had an incredible life. It was painted up in my studio on Screamer Mountain in Georgia. In the spring of 1975, it was part of a 9-work exhibit at the Galleries International in Winter Park, Florida. Those same paintings were shown also at the John F. Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and then at the Hunter Museum in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was also shown in New York City to Leo Castelli at his gallery, which at that time, most of us will recall, was the most prominent gallery in the world. And finally, the paintings were taken to the Whitney Museum on Madison Avenue for a curator to look at. There, the paintings were leaned up against the wall on the outside of the gallery on the street in New York City. So I can say...
There's a funny story connected to that. The show that was in Chattanooga, a man from New York saw it, and he was a personal friend of Leo Castelli's. I hope you know, Leo Castelli was, without doubt, probably the greatest agent for artists and brought forth all of these great names, Warhol, Rauschenberg, Jasper Johns. He's responsible for their, and so occasionally when I would drive up north, I would stop in New York and pay homage at Castelli's gallery at his table of work. Well, all of a sudden, I've been invited to bring my work to Leo Castelli in New York. And we packed up a van, and this piece and a few others were collected together, and we were instructed to bring the paintings into the gallery, and they took a Rauschenberg down and put one of my paintings there. Whoa. And so Castelli I knew my work was not part of his genre, that his stuff was far more contemporary, but he was very intrigued. And he said, "You live in the country, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, your work has the lyricism of Rothko." Well, that's pretty nice to say. And so he turns to one of his secretaries and said, "What's the name of that new curator over at the Whitney? Patterson Sims. Get him on the phone." And Mr. Sims answers the phone, and I'm hearing one side of the conversation. And Costelli said, "Can you come over to my gallery? I have some work here I want you to see." And apparently Mr. Sims said no, and he said, "Well, can he bring his work to the Whitney?" And okay, so it was arranged the following morning. We packed the van up and drove over to the Whitney. And I was instructed to go inside and have Mr. Sims paged. I saw him coming across the lobby shaking his head. Why did Costelli call me? Why did Costelli? I mean, Costelli was God. And, you know, you're intimidated if this man calls you and asks you something. And this guy was, never mind, we won't go there. Anyway, he said, okay. We walked out to the loading ramp. And I had friends with me. He said, okay, take them out and line them up against the wall. So I had a show at the Whitney on the sidewalk, leaning up against the building. And so he said, tell your friends to put them back and you come with me. So I followed him up to his office, and he sat down and said, I still don't understand why Leo called me. And I said, well, Mr. Sims, what would it take for me to have a piece of my work in the Whitney? Me, and I don't like your work. So I wasn't intimidated because I have Leo Costelli standing behind me. So I said, can I use your phone? He said, sure. So I called Costelli in front of Mr. Sims. And Costelli says, well, how did it go? And it seems as if Mr. Sims doesn't like my work. There's a whole lot, another chapter of that story, we won't go there. No, I didn't get a work in the Whitney.
Not yet. Why don't we turn our attention to the triptych? Transformation. Painted in 1978 and been in storage for the past 47 years.
Never shown. They've never been seen.
The first, Vision 1, life leaving the body. Vision 2, the light at the end of the tunnel. The spirit has left the body behind and is being transformed. Vision 3, seeing the light and leaving the tunnel. These paintings were the last works in the light painting series that began when I moved to Screamer Mountain. They would be the last works created in my studio there. A stage had been set for me to begin a passage, knowing nothing, to truthfully understand an encounter with self. Searching for the light I had once glimpsed of. I did not find that light in a great cathedral, but in the wilderness. I moved to West Virginia in the fall of 1978, selling almost everything to start over. These canvases came with me and have never before been exhibited. They have remained stored and never seen publicly because I have felt self-conscious about them and am not confident that the general public would welcome these transformative images. Let me explain. What a loving gift my father gave to me, to choose me to be the one to release him to death to share that one moment intimately, to forgive and to seek my forgiveness. My Father allowed me to share a glimpse of his vision with him. Perhaps for a millisecond, our souls were in complete harmony, locked together as one. I saw him see the beyond. These powerful paintings capture one of the most profound, transformative moments of our existence. This would haunt me for some time. In the following months, the grieving process would take place and in time healing. However, the one thing I could not let go of was, what did he see? I talked about it, dreamt about it, and finally turned to my art. One afternoon, just 2 weeks after the funeral, I sat in my Screamer studio and sketched with a sketch pad and pencil, trying to articulate his vision with my craft. I began to imagine myself the size of a cell, as an observer in the back of my father's eye, catching only a glimpse of what he was seeing at the very moment of his death. I sensed there was pain. He suffered a great deal. How do I draw painful, sharp, piercing lines? Then there was also the warmth of living, body heat and cooling as the physical body was waning.
That's the first painting over there that has the ruby color in it.
These were all bodily sensations. But what did he see? All was dark except for a distant light, dim, just enough light to make out the interior of the eye, to feel in touch with the living. As the light intensified, the colors changed from warm ruby red to violet blue-white. This light was emerging from a distant circular opening, and that opening seemed to move closer, becoming more prominent and brighter. The sensation changed. Instead of the light moving toward him, he began to move towards the light. And in doing so, the physical sensations of life began to diminish and fade. I began to draw a circle with a smaller circle in the center. I envisioned standing under a great dome, looking straight up in a small circular opening at the top. The light was coming from outside through this small opening, and another world outside the dark interior of the dome, another world of light, the dome being the eye's interior. It is said that the eye is the window to the soul, and what more appropriate place for light to enter the soul than through the eye? Ironically, the philosophy and the entire sequence of the images in the painting of the prior 5 years, which had been shown in an interactive exhibit entitled Light Show, served as the foundation for this new work. Without these in the light show, I could have never even begun to articulate with brush this vision of the light. I never intended death and the beyond to be the subject of my work, but that is where my soul and its reflected language journeyed. At times, I do not fully understand my own motivations. I've been given a vehicle to understanding. I became possessed by passion. I immediately started to paint, transposing the drawings and images to canvas as an animation of the vision of a dying person. My father. I am trying to articulate in these paintings to the best of my ability what took place in those last few seconds of my father's life. I wanted to see what I saw him see. It was perhaps the most intense painting process I have ever experienced. From July to September of 1978, I painted nonstop day and night. I was completing 3 large canvases with a 4th underway. It was not my intention, but the 4th canvas ended up being very closely related, almost an animation from one canvas to the next, not just of what he saw, but the radical transformation I was experiencing as a result of that fleeting moment in time where all the eternal and love were revealed. In one moment, a lifetime of bitterness was no longer in my being. Gone. Vanished into a vapor. How much can one moment hold?
I can give you perhaps a little more in-depth understanding of what Claire just read. I had a very difficult relationship with my father. We don't need to go there. You know, all of us either have or haven't. But anyway, I was called to Florida. He was in a coma and was not expected to live too long. And so I went into his room. My mother was there, brother and some relatives were all standing around, and he was basically comatose. And on the plane flying down, a thought came through my head that I wanted to be alone with him, and I didn't know why. I think we all have these instincts about something we want to do, but we don't know why. We're compelled to follow, our instincts. Anyway, eventually everyone in the room left, went to get something to eat or whatever, and I was alone with him. And I'd been watching him from the side, his breathing, I was breathing with him, and I got up and walked over beside the bed and reached down and touched his hand. He opened his eyes wide and looked right at me, which was frightening. And but there was such kindness in his eyes, and I felt it. This was a man that was intimidating and it was ruthless, but he was a different person. He was skeletal. He wasn't physically threatening to me, but we connected. There was a connection that started right there. And then I had this dialogue, and that was a dialogue in my head. I did not say one word. And by the way, at this point in time, I did not know who Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was or near-death experiences. This was just a very naive experience. Anyway, I just said, Dad, please forgive me for anything that I've ever done that's hurt you. And I also forgive you for anything you've ever done that's hurt me, thinking how arrogant of me that I'm going to forgive him. But this was all thought processes, going through. And then another thought in the back, literally, that wanted to come forth, and I was afraid of it. I didn't know what it was going to be. And then I just looked at him and I said in my head, Dad, you can go now. At which point 2 enormous tears came up in his eyes, and his head slowly fell to the side. And they came back. But when he did, his pupils had contracted as if looking at a bright light. This was one of the images that I later conjured up. And he, again, his head fell to the side and came back. The first time he was looking at me through the pupils, contracted pupils. But the second time they had dilated, and he looked right through me. And I know I saw him see something. I don't know what it was. And so as Claire has read, I pondered it for some time. And it eventually manifested in these three pieces here. They're like domes. Imagine yourself inside and looking up, but it's the eyeball that you're looking out through the pupil. And I was amazed that I did these, and I was very self-conscious. You know, back then, this was in the 70s, death was not an easy subject to talk about. I'm fortunate to have known for years Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and also going through the AIDS epidemic. I'm sure a lot of us here have done that, and death was very much at hand. But Elizabeth brought death out of the closet and made it easier to talk about, and that's what we're doing right now. Is this transformation? It's nothing to be afraid of. You know, she, my partner Stephen, when he passed away, she knew him, and I called her to tell her that Stephen had died, and she said, no, Robert, you got it all wrong. He graduated. I'll take that. You know, that's a good metaphor. We don't really know, you know, our own spiritual guides or tell us what might be happening, but at my age, I kind of believe something. It's not going to be the end. And as I have told dying friends, don't be afraid. Whatever it is, it's centered in love. You have nothing to be afraid of. You can go. And that's kind of my philosophy about death also. I have to tell you, the last time we did this, we left and went down to Milo's to have dinner, and there was a woman sitting at the bar who had been here, and she just grabbed me and she says, I have to tell you something. After hearing that talk, I'm not nearly afraid of dying as I was before. So thank you, Elizabeth. You know, but now I would love, please, don't be afraid. Please ask questions, and that's a good. We can open a dialogue about anything that we've talked about here. Anybody? Put their hand up. Oh, come on. Yes, ma'am.
This little painting here, what is this depicted above the clouds? It looks like an eye that looks for people.
Well, okay. This we haven't even talked about these. You know, Claire mentioned my passion for the horizon line, and that's the ultimate horizon. It was done in 2017 for an installation at the Hunter Museum. It's a mystical light. The clouds, I've been painting clouds for many years when I did this, so the clouds are not these primal gases or whatever. they're real clouds, but you ask about the circle. It's a mystical symbol of a source of a light. Yes.
Like you were talking about earlier, with people being primarily motivated, or at least constantly aware of a sense of death, how has I guess accepting or being more comfortable with the notion of death changed the way that you view life?
Yes. Yeah, I think if you spend your life in fear of death, you're really not living. It's inevitable. Memento Mori. Yeah. And to be on a lighter side for just a moment, this painting here, which was the first one of the, quote, the light paintings that I did on Screamer with the dark background. I really think it's a powerful piece. But in the 70s, I lived in the Smokies about 2 hours from Atlanta. I had friends that would come up occasionally from Atlanta to spend the weekend. I had a big house, a lot of room. And they were doing acid. And I was really frightened. You know, I've had stories about people having bad trips, and no, I'm not going to take that risk. But I watched them, and I was really curious about what was going on. And I think maybe the second weekend, I asked them about, you know, what's it like? And he said, if you would like to try it, this was pharmaceutical LSD. It wasn't street stuff. I don't know where they got it, but there's a way that I can introduce you to it, that he would take a half a dose, I would take a whole dose. The half a dose kept him conscious enough to guide me past that initial fear. And so I decided, okay, at sunset, we sat out on the deck and had a nice glass of wine, and I took a hit of acid. And everything was fine, and then I said, I'm getting nauseated. He said, no, you're not. And he just talked me through it. Then all of a sudden, I was out there. Really mind-altering. So we wandered through the house. There was 4 of us, and this was hanging in the studio in a really prime place. And we all walked up to it and went, it's the mother of all paintings. That really happened. And the conclusion, I did it 2 more weekends in a row, and I said, that's enough. No, I know what it was about. It was wonderful, but I liked it too much, and I was not going to go back to that. So it was an empowering experience. I think my mind has actually been altered a little bit from that in a positive way. Mm-hmm. And somebody over here had a hand up.
Is that me? No.
Yeah, hi.
First of all, just thank you so much for being here, Robert. It means so much. This is
Thank you.
Your first trip back up the mountain for this show, and time is at such a premium, especially right now, and it means so much that you are giving so generously of your time and of your energy. It has been such a privilege to witness this work and live with this work and bring my daughters up to witness this work and hear their unfettered, unfiltered interpretation of what it means to them.
Wow.
I was lucky enough to also witness your pieces in the series before this, The Color of Distance, in which you spoke on the horizon. You spoke about how the first time, and forgive me, I'm paraphrasing, how one of the first times you recognized your humanness in an element of nature was in the horizon.
Yes.
And the fact that you've been able to not only sit with that, the profundity of that, but you've been able to alchemize and transmute and bring that to bear in this and break it down into layman's terms for so many of us who now are also privy to that same experience that you had, where we recognize ourselves in these horizon lines. And I wondered if you would speak a little bit more about that moment for you and what happened.
With the horizon line?
Yes, please.
Sure. I was in my early 20s, and I was an Easterner. I had a friend that lived in Seattle, drove a Carmen Ghia, and he was going to drive back home and offered to, if I wanted to go along, I wouldn't have to pay for anything, just help with the driving. And when we got to Kansas and Nebraska, mind you, all I have ever seen are things covered with green puffy things here. And so when we got there, I said, "Stop the car." And I got out and I could turn 360 degrees and see nothing except that line. And it so moved me, the loneliness that was there, because I, as a child, I've alluded to it, but I was accustomed to being alone. And so that loneliness that I had as a child transposed over into this horizon line and standing in this incredible vista that was spellbinding. It was this line that divided between the yin and yang, between the sky and the earth. And that's what, and then this drama takes place above the horizon, which are the clouds. It all kind of neatly fit together. But that moment is indelible. And I have said for years that all I had to do was sit down and draw a horizontal line, and I could do a painting. And Seth back there, bless his heart, has a lovely drawing of one of his critters standing there drawing a horizontal line. And I thank you. He gave me a copy of that, and I love it. I just love it. It means a lot. Anyway, did that help you a little bit, Heather? Thank you for being here, too.
Robert, you've been very open, both in your autobiographical work and House in the Clouds, about being a trauma survivor. How did this experience of profound forgiveness and transcending a fear of death, how did that have an impact on your relationship to your childhood traumas and that healing process?
Well, on his deathbed, we made peace. And I really don't want to get into all of that
Is
business.
part of your healing process?
Yeah, that was very much part of the healing process. But during the AIDS epidemic, I was confronted. That was a gift from my father to experience death in a most loving and forgiving, non-threatening way. And it wasn't long after that scene would repeat itself again and again and again as a caregiver for AIDS patients. When my partner, Stephen, was diagnosed, I was devastated because I thought we were safe. But he became very ill. And part of the book, Core of My Joy, was actually written during that time. And it was emotionally rather intense because here was real love that I'd been denied as a child, that was real love that was about to leave me. And that was rather a profound experience. So I don't know how it came about, but I wrote 3 letters that were never mailed. One to my father, one to my mother, and one to both of them. And it was in that process that I was able to externalize for the first time a lot of repressed crap that was way back here, to put it down in paper to where I can read it. And those 3 letters are in this book. And once I'd done that, I really felt freed. The forgiveness, happened here, and and I think my experience here in West Virginia and up on that mountaintop for 40-some years have been the most powerful years of my life. I've learned more in isolation, not necessarily by choice, but I was alone a lot up there, and I had to do a lot of soul searching and understanding my own history. But there's another key to that. and I won't ramble too much. I told you that I knew Kubler-Ross. There was a reporter from NPR that had come to my house to do an interview, and then when he had finished, he was saying that he had heard that Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was going to build her center somewhere in Virginia. I didn't know who Kubler-Ross was, except somebody had just given me a copy of Mother Earth News, and there was an article in there about this rather remarkable woman. So I said, if you get an appointment to interview her, I'd love to go along. Well, I think 2 weeks later, the Washington Post did a 2-page spread on Kubler-Ross and her bringing her international center to Headwaters, Virginia. So this guy was able to get a hold of her and set up an appointment, and I went with him, and here's this tiny little lady with a thick accent, and come on in, and we went into the kitchen, and all the counters were covered with pies, and she loved to cook. And I also knew that she smoked. I was smoking at that time also, so I took a pack out and I said, is this okay? She said, oh, I love it when smokers come to visit. So we were there, we were supposed to be there for an hour. We ended up spending the whole afternoon just talking with her. It was wonderful, certainly not expected. So when we got ready to leave, I said, I would love to return your hospitality. You know, I would love for you to, I'm not too far away, come see what I do. Well, 2 weeks later, I got a call from her. I wasn't expecting that. And she said, well, I want to take you up on that invitation. I have a friend that will drive me down there, and we'll come look at your work. So I showed her, not these, but others, the cloud paintings that you know. But anyway, I was telling her that you'll notice that in each painting, the source of the light is slightly obscured. If you know my cloud paintings, that's the case. You never see the source. That's the only painting I ever did the source of the light in. Anyway, so I said, but each time you see from one painting to another, you seem to be the light seems to be a little bit closer to you or peeping out from behind the cloud. So she said, do you think you'll ever paint the source of the light? I said, no. I come from a Southern Baptist background, and that would be blasphemy to even suggest that I was going to paint the God, the source of the light. So later on, the woman that was with her came over to me and she said, I have to tell you Elizabeth's comment about your work. She said, he's already seen the light and he doesn't even know it. She then invited me, I don't want to turn this into an epic. She invited me to come to one of her workshops, Life, Death, and Transition. It was a week with 100 people. Clergy, nuns, doctors, nurses, people that were terminally ill, people who were bereaved by the loss of a child, a whole gamut of people that came to this workshop, and 100. And I'll do it as briefly as possible. In the process of coping with all of these tragedies in life, she had a thing called externalization, and that is we all carry in us a sack of unfinished business that we need to lance and get out, externalize it. And so through her techniques, each person, one at a time over a period of 4 days, went up on a mattress in front with a pile of pillows, a rubber hose about this long, and a pile of phone books. And there was a facilitator that would talk to you, and I don't know how the magic happened other than it gained momentum with time. whatever this is that was being held inside of you that was holding you back from coming to your full potential as a human being would break through. And I heard stories. There was a man there in his 40s, said when he was a child, his dog got run over and he was crying and his father slapped him and said, "Boys don't cry." And so he was never able to mourn or grieve anything in his life until that moment when he told what happened, and at which point he just started to bawl. He grabbed those pillows and rolled around and just cried and cried and cried and cried. And we all cried with him. There was an elderly woman, probably in her late 70s, little lady, little old sweet blue-haired lady, came up, and she said when she was between 6 and 8, her father had raped her, and she'd never been able to get that out. She picked up that rubber hose and beat the shit out of those phone books and called him, made a Sailor Bush, called her father every name under the sun, and it was out. And I noticed as time went by, all those people who had, quote, done their work were in a group over here. There was a glow about them. And all those that had not were kind of, what's going on? So, get back to your, it's a long introduction to your, about finding peace. It was finally my turn. I mean, I got the bravery to go up, and I actually, instead of looking at the facilitator, I looked at the group, and I said, I want to do something different. I want to tell you a love story. So I told them about my father's death and the forgiveness. But then I stopped and I said, you know, this is just really small talk. It's not really what I want to tell you. I'm gay. That was daunting back then. I was 50 years old, and I was never able to, amongst strangers or public groups, ever to feel that free to say that as I am now. And that was life-altering. I was freed. I literally was freed from the stigma that had been over me for 50 years. And and then the facilitator says, I think Robert needs a big hug. And I said, preferably from a man. And so that's where I found real peace, through Kubler-Ross. She was an incredible woman. I also recommend her writings on Death and Dying, which is her classic. Somebody else, please. Save my voice. Yes. Hey, Seth.
Hi. Everybody who I've sent down here in the months that it's been out, I basically describe it as the most moving body of work I've seen shown here in all my time living here.
Coming from you, Seth, who I admire greatly, that's a high honor, privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That means a lot to me. And the response, again, I've been in here by myself with watching people come in, and you know, a lot of people, when you go in a gallery, you just walk around and then go out the door. Well, I've watched people come in here and they just stopped. And fortunately, the guys had set up some chairs down the middle here where you could sit down and just quietly meditate. This is so moving. And I have a wonderful footnote. It doesn't have to be the end, but I don't want to put her on the spot. But the curator from the Clay Museum is here. And we've been talking. Once they leave here, they have no home. They'll go back in the closet for 50 years. Not with me, but And so there's been some serious talk. They may end up with a permanent home at the Clay Museum. And for that, I am so grateful. I have one other person who doesn't like for me to say this, but the person behind putting this together is Dan, who's been working on this for almost as long as he's known me, that these paintings should really be shown. And then he finally approached the guys up here, this great yeah. So he made it happen. He made it happen, and not with the easiest circumstances. The weather has not cooperated with this show at all, except for today. But he moved all these things, got a truck and moved them and got them up here, and the guys helped him hang it and light it. And I didn't come to the opening because I was sick. But when I did come up, I was blown away. I had never seen these cousins together in one room, which was just, it's remarkable.
I've been here a few times and been sitting in silence and looking at these. And so the thing about peace that you mentioned about, finding your peace and about Kubler-Ross. And I'm wondering what would happen if they weren't in that order. Would people who have understand peace, would they naturally order them in their mind?
I don't know. As a piece of art, they should stand on their own merit as just by itself.
But they're greater together.
Yeah, absolutely. If you study them, the geometrics that are in them are evolving, and that was fun to do, to create these shapes, and they're all crosses except for this one. Well, the opening is a cross, but again, it's not. We have a lovely priest in here. It's not to be anti-Christian. I want them to be more universal in that, as and particularly with this one, I really think it's a powerful piece, personally, even though I was on acid once looking at it.
These pieces you gave like a very clear, you placed the individual in them when you were talking about them. I'm wondering if you have that same connection to the paintings, that you have a vantage point of that single individual.
The vantage point is from the light source. If you notice carefully, the light source is in the middle, but if you look where the light is hitting those clouds, it's all aiming right back to that light source up there. I will tell you that in the thought process, particularly in the second piece, that's a fisheye of that. It's 360 degrees of that horizon line, and well, actually both of them. And of course, this one here, you can turn upside down and it looks fine. It's 360 degrees. The arc, the halo that's around it is pretty. It's symbolic, as in all these pinstripes. They catch light, particularly in this one. Anybody else? Yes.
You were just saying it was fun to do the geometric. Did you sketch it with pencil? Like, how do you get it so precise in the painting? Because
I had a really big compass. Seriously.
Yeah.
It was a wooden compass that would open out about this big. And I probably sketched them on paper first to get the mechanics of it. And then I was able to, by the way, they all originate from that pinpoint in the middle. That's where the point of the compass sat, on that pinpoint, and then everything rotated out from that all the way around on all of them. So the mechanics of it were, well, there was a bit of drafting involved, but yeah, it was fun. There's a poster back there next to Chris's head that was printed 50 years ago. It was the opening of the show at Galleries International in Florida, and it was a poster for the show that these two were in. And it opened this month, on the 14th, 50 years ago, and it closes today, 50 years ago. Which is quite a coincidence. Really, for coming. And thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.